All right. Kevin Oestreicher, episode number 2. We did another episode almost exactly a year ago. I don't know the exact date, but I remember that episode was the Ravens going into the AFC Championship game against the Bills. Or
Yep.
that was not even the championship, the divisional game. But yeah. So I mean, the same this week last year in the football schedule, at least. I don't know, but welcome back on, man. We got a lot to talk about, and yeah, excited to have you on.
Yeah, I'm excited to be back. I appreciate you having me, and I know hopefully we can do another one where they're actually in the Super Bowl next time. I think that'd be pretty cool. But I know there's still a lot to talk about with Baltimore and everything that's going on around the city and the team right now, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that I'm sure you've been doing a lot of cool things yourself too. So we'll get into all of that. Thanks for coming on. So let's just dive right into the Ravens. It's kind of the heart of the Ravens media season, I guess, even though their playing season is over. But yeah, Harbaugh's fired. Just right off the bat, what were your thoughts on that? Were you hoping for that to happen? Were you what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I thought it was time. And I had been saying really since last year, it was probably time. I would have hoped that they could have tried to keep Mike McDonald on the staff in 2023 and obviously promote him to be the head coach. But I just thought it's going as far as they ever did in the Lamar era that year. I really didn't think it was realistic they were going to fire John Harbaugh that year, even though the result of that AFC Championship game was super disappointing just based off of, how it all went. But, things just run their course. I mean, it was 18 years, was a really long time. And, it's something where even in today's sports landscape, not just football, I mean, you're lucky as a head coach if you make it 5 years. I mean, that's considered a pretty solid tenure just because, and I think a lot of it does have to do with, it's not everything, obviously, but the media landscape of stuff and just how much pressure. And you even see it with younger quarterbacks where, like, if you don't have that instant success as a head coach or a young quarterback, even in basketball or baseball or football, hockey, whatever, like those young stars, they don't get as much leeway as they used to. And so for Harbaugh to make it that long, even Tomlin in Pittsburgh, who stepped down like 19 years, that's an extremely impressive feat. But, Steve Bisciotti spoke to the media on Tuesday, and a lot of what he said was stuff I was saying. It's like, the fourth quarter leads became too much. They would make the playoffs and then kind of fizzle out in this unceremonious way. And, it's okay if that happens once or maybe twice, but, like when it continues to kind of go that way and happen that way, and you've gone through multiple coordinators and multiple different iterations of the roster, and you're not going to get rid of Lamar Jackson because that's not the answer. Well, I think it all kind of just lands on John Harbaugh. And there's been a lot of reports about how stuff went down and how everything happened. And it seems like everything's coming from like 10 different directions. But I think really what it comes down to is, it's not that Harbaugh's not a good coach. I think he is. But, some of the things this team needs right now, I just don't think Harbaugh can provide them. I think they need more of a mind offensively or defensively, where Harbaugh is more of a delegator at this point. And some of the things that just continue to creep up weren't acceptable. So, maybe it comes a year or two too late. But, the Ravens are a loyal organization, and I would rather cover and be a fan and whatnot of a loyal organization than one that's not, because I think a lot more comes bad when it's a non-loyal team. But, they've had instances where they've probably kept guys on for a year or two too long. This was probably another instance of that, but, I guess it's better late than never.
Yeah. That's kind of a successful breakup. I was thinking, since like both sides are kind of like, I think Ravens fans will continue to root for Harbaugh, and Harbaugh will continue to root for the Ravens. It's like, it was just kind of time, it's not like a marriage. It's not meant to be for life. It's more like CEOs don't stay with the same business for that long. Usually, they have different phases of their career, different phases of life. So yeah, felt like a good time to move on. Who of the candidates out there, who are you kind of hoping the Ravens end up with, dig into?
There are a couple. I mean, I've seen a lot about people not being as excited about some of the younger minds, like a Clint Kubiak in Seattle or a Jesse Minter in Los Angeles. And, there have been, mainly that's due to questions, I think, about leadership and can they come in and command a room and lead men? Because I think that's something with John Harbaugh where the big questions were like, is the message becoming stale? And, I think that probably for some players, yes. But at the end of the day, I think that, across all sports, and this even just, it's in life. I think that when you work for a place, There are going to be employees that like their boss and employees that don't. It just kind of goes that way. And I think that's probably what happened in Baltimore is some players, really loved John Harbaugh and like, this is their guy. And then other players were just like, this isn't working anymore. This is not the guy I want to play for. It was probably something along those lines. And for Harbaugh, he kind of developed his coaching style over last decade or so to become a player's coach. And I just think that, again, he did that. But then if the message becomes stale, you need somebody new who's going to give you that message. And I think that a guy like Kubiak or Minter can do that. But based off what Steve Bisciotti said, seems like they're pretty interested in some former head coaches that were kind of the hottest candidates at their positions 5, 6, or 7 years ago with the offensive or defensive side of the ball, became a head coach and then just kind of fizzled out, whether it was due to bad quarterback play or got caught up in the cycle. So maybe that's like a Brian Flores in Minnesota right now, or, do they go with a Mike McDaniel in Miami who just got fired? I think McDaniel would be a really good offensive coordinator because I think if you hire a younger guy, you can build a really veteran staff around that guy, still keep the expertise that they have. But, if it's Jesse Minter as a defensive guy, McDaniel is your OC, and then, maybe he brings over a younger coach from Los Angeles to be the Ravens D coordinator. I think that works. It's the same thing on the offensive side of the ball. If you go with Kubiak, maybe you bring in Jim Schwartz as a defensive coordinator, and then you bring a coach over from Seattle there. So I'm really intrigued by those two, but I think Brian Flores would probably be my top choice. I think he kind of got a bad hand in Miami. I know there have been a lot of reports. He obviously also has the lawsuit that he filed and all that happening with the NFL. So I don't know if that's going to contribute at all to what's going on. I think the Ravens at this point are currently still the only team that have requested him to be a head coach or to interview for it. So, we'll see what happens there, but I think Flores would be a really solid option.
I like that too. That's kind of what I'm hoping happens. Part of what I was thinking too is that he and Lamar are both, like Flores and Lamar are both kind of like the outcasts a little bit. They kind of have gone against the grain in the league in certain ways, and I feel like there's always like narratives around them, even though they just produce no matter what happens. So I think that Flores' presence, I think it'll be awesome. I also like Robert Saleh. I feel like
that's a good one too. Yep.
I could see the Ravens and Steelers ending up with Flores and Saleh in either combination, which would be kind of funny. But yeah, man. So what about the Orioles? I wanted to talk about that too.
Yeah.
I'm a little more excited about the Orioles because we're kind of seeing it unfold, and it's kind of interesting. We've got this at the same time. We've got a lot of turnover, and they're similar positions. The Orioles and the Ravens both have a lot of young talent, controllable talent. They've got a core squad for the next few years, so they've got windows, and they're trying to, cross the T's, dot the I's to capitalize on these windows. But yeah, what do you think about the Orioles? What do you think about their moves in this offseason, the new coach and everything?
Yeah, I like what they've done so far. Albarnez seems like a really good hire for them, someone who can really, not just grow with the young core the Orioles already have, but I think also just bring in a different leadership style. I mean, it was clear, kind of like what we were talking about with Harbaugh, some of the decisions Brandon Hyde made over the last, I guess, calendar year he was the manager in Baltimore. It just wasn't working. And, I thought Mancelino came in and, he did a better job, I thought, than I expected him to, but I just, he wasn't the long-term guy for me. I think Albarnez can be the long-term guy. I think the big shift has been, and I had said this during the year for the Orioles as their year was unfolding, I was just like, look, it was a bad offseason for Baltimore last year. They didn't spend the money they needed to. They didn't address the positions they needed to in the ways they needed to. And I had said that, like, I can't see Mike Elias making that mistake 2 years in a row. Like, I feel like he had, and that's kind of what I feel about Eric Acosta this year in Baltimore with the Ravens. I'm like, he didn't do some things at certain positions. There's no way he's going to do it again. And that's what I felt about Mike Elias. And he goes out and he, makes a couple of trades, Grayson Rodriguez out, Taylor Ward comes in, and you make a move for Shane Baz, who I think is a really intriguing guy that when he's on can be like a high-end number 2 starter for you at the very minimum. Like, that's intriguing to me. But obviously, like, spending the money and signing Pete Alonso and like making a move like that, which is something Orioles fans and this fan base has been wishing for years, of finally like spending big money. And I mean, the last time something like that happened, it was a guy like Chris Davis. And obviously, like, that was a move that they made, and that contract pales in comparison to what this one is. But even still, that's what Orioles fans have been hoping for, because I think at the end of the day, they still shouldn't be done. I know it's actually the day we're recording this, Ranger Suarez signed with the Red Sox, and that was a name on the starting staff that a lot of people wanted in Baltimore. You still have options like Framber Valdez, and on the trade market is a Freddie Peralta available or Mackenzie Gore. But I think that they need to do more with their starting staff, because we saw it last year, even 2 years ago, where the Orioles, they were 7 deep 2 years ago in the starting staff, and then everybody gets injured, and all of a sudden you only have 3 arms that you trust. And I think, to me, you can never have enough arms in an organization, especially top end arms. And I think that making that last move, that last like big pitcher move, would be the cherry on top. But I said this last year too, and I guess it carries a little less weight now than it did last year, because they did bring in more vets and made more moves this offseason. But this year is going to come down to their young core. Like, those guys need to make the necessary improvements, because, obviously Adley had a down year last year. Gunnar, he was up and down throughout the season, but, some of his numbers were off. Kowser was injured for a lot of the year, and he struggled at times. And Westberg was injured. Holiday was fine. I thought he had good moments, and also some moments of like still a young guy learning. And obviously on the starting staff too, like Trevor Rogers really became a revelation for them as the year went on. I mean, he was incredible. I mean, if he had pitched like that the full year, he would have been the runaway Cy Young, and it's not even close. So it's going to be those guys with like Bradish coming back and being healthy. How does that work out for you? With the bullpen and Felix being down, like, can a guy come in and really step up in that moment? And I think it's really interesting, because the Orioles did make moves in their bullpen. I mean, they signed a big money closer, and they do have those options available to them. But I think this team, while the floor, I think, is higher with the moves they've made in the veteran department, the ceiling is going to be carried by the young core and how those guys can continue to develop and continue to grow. And, we saw good flashes last year and bad flashes. Like, I thought Kobe Mayo was awesome for them down the stretch after getting an opportunity. But then, a guy like Heston Kjerstad really can't find his way onto the roster, is still dealing with injuries. So it's never going to be an 100% hit rate on your young talent, and the Orioles have a lot of it. But at this point, like, I guess the word I'll use is I'm intrigued by what this Orioles team can do this season.
This concept, I've been thinking about it. I read some article about it. The article was saying that John Harbaugh was looking for alignment at his next position. And I was thinking the Ravens have always had that really well, from back in the Ozzie days, but I mean, he's still around there, but from Bisciotti down, the Ravens they've always had, I think, this, maybe if not the strongest, one of the strongest alignments, and from front office down through head coach. I'm curious, what do you think of the Orioles now? What's their new owner's name? He's in his second year, right?
Oh, Rubenstein, yeah.
Yeah, Rubenstein, yeah. So how would you kind of like think about the Orioles alignment or lack thereof, from Rubenstein down through Albarnaz?
Yeah, I think that, and Rubenstein has talked about it a decent amount, where he's deferring all the baseball stuff to Elias, and there are multiple owners in that group. Obviously, Rubenstein is the head one, but Mike Arrighetti and Kyle Ripken Jr. and a lot of guys. But I think that the ownership group is kind of just like stepping back a little bit and kind of letting Mike Elias do his thing. And obviously he got promoted this offseason, and they don't really have a GM under him at this point. So he is making all of those decisions. But I do think even when it was Elias and Hyde, like they were aligned in a way, but the result just wasn't there. Where, they are very much, last year it was very much like the feel was off a little bit, felt like it was much more analytics driven instead of just actually just being like, hey, who plays the best or who's playing the best right now? You had a lot of inexplicable decisions about benching certain guys. Like, for example, Jackson Holiday, he would never get opportunities against lefties. And the only way he's going to be able to grow is if he gets opportunities against lefties. And they just weren't throwing him out there, even when they were losing. And I'm like, look, if you're losing games, at least you can get your young guys experience. Like, it is what it is. I mean, in a lost season, you can still have positives. And it's just like that was never working. And so I think for Albarnaz coming in, fresh perspective, he and Elias working very close to each other. Like, you're right. With the Ravens, all those guys are aligned. And it became like Steve Bisciotti was saying, yeah, like it was John Harbaugh who was consoling him. Like, that's how tight-knit that group is with the Ravens. And I think for the Orioles, it's not like an 18-year relation where Eric DeCosta has been in Baltimore forever. Steve Bisciotti's been there practically forever. Harbaugh's was there for 18 years. it's a lot more of like Alpernaz is in his first year, Rubenstein is in his second, and Elias has been there for a handful now, but it's more about feeling each other out in the relationship. But I do wonder about the mindset of this changing, and I think that it will. Like, I think Alpernaz is much more of a, hey man, you're hot, get in that lineup until you're not, like that, and you need a break. I think that's something the Orioles lacked, and I think that him adding that mindset in maybe will help Mike Elias take on a new perspective, and while I don't think Rubenstein and the ownership group is necessarily as involved in those decisions, and Bisciotti made it clear on Tuesday he's not as involved on the football side either anymore, but he still has a hand in it. I think that organizational alignment is very real, and I think that a lot of organizations do not have that, and you see it on a consistent year-to-year basis, that it can be the downfall of your on-field product if the off-field product isn't where it needs to be, and your off-field drama isn't handled, and there is that stuff. I mean, we saw it in Baltimore with the Ravens the last 2 years. For an organization that rarely dealt with drama, it's been 2 very exhausting drama-filled years for that Ravens franchise. And in Baltimore with the Orioles, you saw it a little bit as well. But I think, to me, the mindset and the perspectives that Alpernaz can bring, I think, would be refreshing to everybody in that chain of command, and I think he can help that.
How would you rate Albernaz's like attributes, or what would you like? What are his strengths? I read some articles about him coming in. I knew he was a hot candidate. He was the assistant coach or the bench coach on Cleveland, right?
Yep.
And I know like the players all love him, and just I watched his interview, and I could kind of see why he's just authentic, and I think that relates to people. But like what I don't even know. Do you know his background? Do you know what kind of like in football, you kind of have the defensive coaches, the offensive coaches, and then like the CEO coaches. The delegator, I think, is the term you used. But yeah, like what does Albernaz bring?
Well, he was a catcher, so he played a little bit in the Rays organization, and I guess all the injuries the Orioles had at catcher last year, maybe they can suit him up for a game or two if they need him, but he's someone like you mentioned. I mean, it's the player coach aspect of things where I think that he just really has a pulse. I think his experience will really help. And, I think that he also built a really good staff around him where he brought in guys that he knew. There were also a couple of holdovers from the old Orioles staff that I think will really help. But I think just a guy that the young players can relate to. And at this point with the Orioles, I think that that's just what this organization needs, is more of a younger, up-and-coming guy where, the Hyde hire itself, I never really loved it in the first place. And I mean, he had a ceiling, I think, with this organization where I think he was the right guy for the rebuild, but he was never the long-term option where he got them through a rebuild. And that was kind of my mindset when they signed him on. I was like, I don't view Brandon Hyde as a 15-plus year Orioles manager, but I think he can be good in the right role. I think for Albernaz and his role with his strengths working with young guys, and, like everyone in that Guardians organization was, from what I read up on, devastated to lose him because he had that impact in the clubhouse and on the bench. And I think that with him, he was actually waiting for the right opportunity. I mean, the reports are he turned down multiple other opportunities over the course of the last couple of years, or maybe it was just last year, but still to find the right opportunity for him. And I think that the Orioles, with their young core, with some of the guys that they signed this offseason, I think it made sense to bring in someone that can relate to your younger guys, work them through slumps, and just have a better feel for the game than I think Brandon Hyde did in the later part of his Orioles manager career, because I think Brandon Hyde was not empowering the players, especially the younger guys, with some of that, where one of the things that I think it was Mark DeRosa, he said it on the other show I work for, the Ryan Ripken show, is he said that, like, if you don't have a role every day, things just get all like confusing. And, especially for guys in the bullpen, you don't know who's the closer, don't know who's going to come in the 7th inning, or if you're not in the lineup every day, or maybe you are in the lineup, and you do really well, but then you're inexplicably taken out of the lineup for like a week and you don't know what you did. You've been playing well. And I think that's what Brandon Hyde was doing at the end of his Orioles tenure. And it made no sense at all. So I think Albernaz, with his feel, his experience as a player, and, coming up through the ranks, I think that it's going to be really refreshing for the organization to have someone like that.
I like the way you kind of talk about his feel, and it seems like that's what you were kind of mentioning was lacking it with a little bit with Hyde, with the the analytics driven decisions and just kind of not having that pull. So sounds good. That definitely makes me feel good. And it's cool. It's feel like the Orioles had one of the more attractive openings, and now the Ravens have probably the most attractive opening with just the stability of the organization and Lamar as quarterback. Even though it's a disappointing season, it still feels like a good time to be a Baltimore fan.
Yeah, there are always things you can take away from a lost season. That's what I kept saying the whole year for the Orioles. And I guess, it wasn't a lost season for the Ravens until the clock hit 0 in week 18. But even still, like, you're able to play young guys more, get experience for them. And of course, while it's not what you want, or it's not like acceptable in terms of where your organization, especially for the Ravens, where the organization is, like, there are still some things that you can take into the next seasons that you learned from that lost season. So I think that, lost seasons are hard and bad seasons are tough, but I guess there's always a silver lining.
Yeah. That's, John Middlecoff, the podcaster.
It sounds familiar, but I haven't listened to anything.
Yeah. He's pretty good. He's a football guy.
Okay.
He does a weekly one with Colin Cowherd.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And then he's kind of built his own channel from that. But, he was saying that next year he would expect the Ravens to open up as one of the Super Bowl favorites, but not the Steelers. And that's, I don't know. Kind of got that last laugh. And you see Steve Bisciotti yesterday when he said that the Mike Tomlin celebration, he's like, that probably takes him off my list after we let him win or let him. But his phrasing is pretty good. Honestly, Bisciotti's awesome. I didn't really realize how slick he was until that interview, but it's cool to see. I'm stoked. The last thing I was wondering about the Orioles is the money. Do you think that the Pete Alonso contract, do you think that's a sign of things to come, or is that the aberration? Like the Chris Davis contract back in the day, that was the only one, it was the only big contract they ever signed, and they almost had to, and they deferred a bunch of the money. So it wasn't even like they were, I don't know, the Orioles are still paying that contract, I think. You probably know better than me. It might have been the last year. But anyways, what do you think that the money's going to keep coming in? Is this Pete Alonso deal a signal or an aberration?
I think it is a sign of things to come. I just don't know how quickly it's going to be like consistent spending. Where I don't know if they're going to make another move this offseason. I would hope so, and I think that they need to. But I don't think that it's going to be a Chris Davis situation where Pete Alonso is that move, and then we don't have another one like that for the Orioles for 10 plus or however many years it was. I do think that, especially with the young core, you have more time to do it, but you also got to be careful about that because windows can open and close in an instant. I mean, I remember when people were talking about the Cubs, back when they won the World Series, and this is about to be a dynasty, or some of these other younger teams that were up and coming, and all of a sudden, like, a window shuts like that. So you also have to make decisions, because it's not just about signing the big name on the free agent market or trading for the big name. It's also, you have to re-sign a lot of your own guys here too. And I thought they did a good job with Samuel Basallo and signing him to that deal. Like, I thought that was 100% the correct move to get a young talent like that under contract, take the risk. But I think long-term is going to pay off for them. But, how do you maneuver a Gunnar extension? How do you maneuver an Adley extension, or Cowser or Westberg or any of these young guys? Jackson will come up eventually, and they still have time, but it is going to creep up on you. And you're going to have to determine, I mean, if you're David Rubenstein, you're going to have to determine, all right, how much money is going to get poured into this thing? And so you have to make sure your young core is locked up as well. And for a while last year, it was like, I don't even know who's going to be on this team next year in 2 years, because that stuff was all coming up. And now at least Basallo will be there long-term. Alonso will be there long-term. But other than that, you're really going to need to put that money on a table for these guys, because if they do not, another team will. And I don't expect them to re-sign every single one of these guys. Seems like with Basallo being signed, Adley could be on the way out eventually, unless he wants to transition over to first base or something along those lines. But you still have an opportunity to improve your club this year. And I think the Orioles can be good for years to come if you continue to throw that money in the organization. But, they're also never going to be a New York or an LA market. And that's just the reality of it, is why they lost Corbin Burns last year, is because, Corbin wanted to go home to Arizona. And sometimes that just is what it is. There are some guys that just don't want to come to Baltimore. And it's unfortunate because I think they're missing out. But, they're never going to have the pull that some of those bigger cities have. So you have to work within those confines. But again, like, money talks, and I think that if you offer enough, that might be convincing enough to come to play in Baltimore with the Orioles. So I would hope that it's a sign of things to come, and I am cautiously optimistic that it will.
Yeah, me too. The Pete Alonso deal feels different than the Chris Davis, since they just outbid everyone. It wasn't like he developed a relationship with the league. They just, so it's got me excited, but I don't know. It almost feels like they have to win, or they have to have some success in order to keep getting the investment. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't really know Rubenstein style yet.
Yeah.
All right, man. So I wanted to get into what you're doing. It's just for people listening who are interested in the media world. Yeah. So just first of all, like, I guess what are your ultimate goals in the media world, and then we'll get into like kind of how you're building up towards that. But yeah, what when you got into the media world, and I know we talked about this on the last episode too, but like what was the draw for you? How'd you know that this is your place?
Yeah, I didn't really know at first, and I had long aspirations for a long time to work for an organization, particularly NFL, be a scout and eventually work my way up. And that was like my dream. But I knew I wanted to work in sports. And, I had never really gave the media world any consideration. It just, it's not really who I was. And an opportunity fell in my lap. I was really grateful for it. I was able to go out to LA for a couple of summers and work out there. My first summer, I worked for, it works with a bunch of, YouTubers, and, I worked in their audience department and figuring things out and doing a bunch of just, intern stuff out there, but still learning on the job. And then I went back out there before my senior year of college, and I got an opportunity to work with the network I'm working for now, the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as for ABC TV in their newsroom, and just kind of learning about the business. And I had worked on their social media before, it was really big. So I was kind of laying the foundation for that, doing surveys. And there was a podcast host for every NFL team except for the Ravens. And so I was maybe my last week in LA before I went back to school for my senior year. And, I kind of jokingly told my boss, the person I was working for, I was like, oh, because I've been a Ravens fan my whole life. And I said, oh, if you need someone to talk about the Ravens and, do the podcast, I'll do it. And I was almost like not joking, but I was like, there's no way I'd ever even get picked for this. And he was like, and he liked what I did over the summer enough. And he was like, oh, really? And I was like, oh, I guess. Okay. Yeah. So I sent in a demo and a couple of demos, and David Locke, who is the radio announcer for the Jazz, he is the main network guy. He's the one who founded it and everything. Called me up, I think on my second to last day or last day in LA. And or maybe it was a week before, and said, we want to give you the opportunity. And I, accepted it, knowing that I thought that it could be something that really propelled my career, at least for experience. I didn't really know where it was going to go, but I was intrigued and I wanted to do it, and I was really excited about it. And so, my first episode, I remember doing just like in the Airbnb I was staying at in LA before I went back to school. And, it started off small. It had been an inactive show for 6 months prior to that, had practically no following at that point. And, it's just continuing to grind through and learn. And I had no media experience, no radio training, TV training, never took classes about it in school, never been in front of a camera or a microphone before. And, I wanted it to be the best that I could make it and continue to grow in that role. And, looking back at my first episode and where that was versus where I am now, it definitely still shell shocks me every time I listen to it. Because, I didn't know how to inflect my voice. I didn't know how to provide energy on a stream and consistently, because, like when I'm talking to you, like, we're having a conversation, we're going back and forth, but I'm a solo host of that show. So I had to learn like to talk into a camera for 30 minutes by myself, essentially having a conversation by myself and steering that the way that I need it to be steered. And so as the years have gone on and I've grown and the show has grown, like I've definitely, I've learned to love media, like I've grown my Twitter following from nothing up to nearly 50,000. I've really started to do the Instagram thing. And it's a lot of learning still, like every single day, because there's so many new mediums that come out and ways to consume content. And, the way that not just podcasts in general, but video podcasts, where the show started off as an audio only. And then I think it was 2021 is when we started to do video, or maybe 2022. And that's kind of been the way. And then from that, it's evolved into now you clip up stuff from your podcast and you put them out in short form, and, you make graphics a certain way. And so I've kind of had to self-teach all of myself how to use different softwares and the latest trends, and especially on the YouTube side of things. Cause again, like I have awesome communities, both video and audio, but there's a lot more that you can do, like, especially on a platform like YouTube, because, Spotify pushes it, Apple pushes it, and all the audio stuff does that thing. But on YouTube, it's very much also about not just the content in your episode, but how do you get people to actually click on and consume that content in the first place? And so I've had to learn, and it's been a process. I've changed the style that I've not only done videos, but how I've titled videos, how I've done my thumbnails. Like it's all an evolving process, which again, like stuff kind of goes in and out of fashion, like with the snap of your fingers. And, you have to know when it does. And I think, like, honestly, you can tell in the metrics when certain stuff doesn't work and when certain stuff does work. And it's a learning experience, like every single day. And there are even shows where I'm just like, I don't know how this is going to do, but I'm really intrigued to see how it will if I title it a certain way this way, or I make a graphic look this way, maybe put one or two faces or two or three faces. How is that going to work? Put my face on the thumbnail or don't put my face on a thumbnail. And there's so much that goes into it, how to tag a video, how to do all this. And to learn all that, and again, like almost self-teach myself all of this. And obviously I've gotten great advice from the people I work for and work with. It's really cool on a daily basis. Obviously the show has grown really successfully in my eyes, and I think I've had a lot of success with it. And I guess that a long answer to your question, long story short, is that, as it grew, I didn't know that, a long-term home for me would be in sports media. But I think as everything developed for me and I started to establish relationships and really started to find my own, I didn't imagine myself, being able to sit in front of a camera and talk and have the platform that I do, but I'm really grateful that I do. And sometimes life just kind of works crazy. I graduated during COVID and I had a job lined up. Essentially, like I was interviewing for multiple different positions and in multiple big sports companies. And, I felt pretty good about one. And all of a sudden, the world shuts down and, that opportunity kind of goes away. And I really decided at that point, like, I'm going to try my best. And not that I wasn't trying before, obviously, but like now that this is the option that I'm working on right now and continuing to work on, and like I was done with school and everything, and I was kind of in this limbo period. I was like, all right, like I'm going to like focus all in on this and still obviously try to see what's out there. But, I'm going to take what I was already doing and all that hard work I was already putting into the show beforehand, and I'm going to just keep on grinding this and keep on doing this. And, it's gotten to where I am today, and life works in funny ways. And I'm really grateful it worked in this way for me.
That's sweet, man. Sounds like you're kind of following your feel a lot. That keeps coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, you kind of have the sports as your North Star, and then just try different things, see what feels right. And it's cool. It seems like you've learned to love the little details around the media specific world, the optimizing the titles, thumbnails. Yeah, all that. Do you do all that yourself for the Locked On podcast? Like, that's all you?
Yeah, it's a solo operation for me. So I'm the one that is making the thumbnails. I'm the one that's, titling the videos, tagging the videos. It's a 5-day-a-week show. And, the one I just recorded before hopping on with you here is episode 1,683 consecutively for me on the weekdays. I've literally never missed one episode, even on holidays and whatnot, since taking over on the weekdays. And, I've expanded a lot where, like that's the thing, like the Locked On Podcast Network is, we really value, doing a show every single weekday, providing that news and making sure that, everybody is up to date. But I've also added on a lot more to that is not required. And that's something actually, because I had a couple of different jobs as I was kind of waiting to see if anything would open up for me. And, at one of the jobs, there was one of the people I was working with, I kind of asked him, like, what kind of makes a successful like worker to you? Like, what do you value? And I was going through interviews and whatnot, and someone told me, going above and beyond is something that we value here. And, that's something that I've kept with me. And so while it's not required, when there is a headline to talk about on the weekend, I will do a bonus episode on the weekend and I will talk about it. Our requirement is 5 days a week, but I want to go above and beyond to make sure that I am putting the show in the best possible position to succeed. And again, there's nothing wrong with not doing that. But to me, that's what I decided is I want to make sure that I am doing what I can, to keep my show's name out there, to make sure it gets kept in the algorithms and whatnot. And there are obviously ways that happens without bonus episodes and without extra content, but that's what I wanted to do was like make sure that, if I'm delivering daily content and I'm making sure that I'm keeping my viewer base, listener base up to speed, is that when there's something big to talk about, I will talk about it. Like I do an instant reaction show for every single piece of big news that drops, even if it's not that big, even if it's just like an assistant coach hire. And that's what people are talking about. Like I did one for the Bisciotti interview yesterday, or I guess on Tuesday, we're talking here on Wednesday, but that was something where, it's like, all right, I could talk about it in the morning and, that's all good. And it's just a couple hours later, but, I wanted to, people were talking about it. And so I'm like, all right, I want to maximize on this and capitalize on people's excitement and help people be excited. And something I actually started up this year was watch-alongs, where I think I'm one of the only people on the network to do it, where, I'll sit and react to a game live on stream for 3 hours. And it's something I wanted to test out and try, and I got approval for it. And it's interesting because, obviously, like I have my communities, like the big Locked On Ravens community itself, but there are communities within those communities, which I just think is so cool, where, my shows premiere at 6 a.m. on YouTube every day when they come out on the weekdays and on the weekends whenever they come out. And obviously in audio form, they come out at that time too. But on YouTube, obviously there's the option to premiere them. And then that allows you to go in and be a live chatter in it while the show premieres. And, there are people every morning I see in there, and, they'll say good morning to each other. They'll talk to each other. And like, I think that's really cool of like having that sense of community within a much larger community. And so there are people for the watch alongs who every game they were in there. And it's not like people sometimes, for games, they just want to watch the games and they don't want to listen to me talk about the game because they want to be immersed in the game. But then I also do an instant reaction show after the games, which then after the game, people will come into, and that's a whole separate community. And so I've really tried to foster and build that, but all that is me, where, I get help from the people like the network. They set me up really nicely. But in terms of, recording the shows, booking guests, getting those guys on, editing the shows, I do that all myself, uploading in video and audio. And now we have membership tiers. I do that as well. It's a solo operation. It's a lot of work. And, I wish my sleep schedule was better. If I'm being honest with you, it's not great right now. And it never really has been since I'm doing this. But again, like I know how amazing the opportunity is that I have, and how, incredibly awesome it is to be in a position where I can talk about, a passion of mine and do it and have the platform that I do. And so there are always going to be sacrifices that you have to make in every decision that you make. And, my decision was to really go head first on this and make it as good as I possibly can. And there's always room for improvement for me. I'm definitely not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying I'm perfect, because nobody is, but I do my best every single day to provide the best content that I can and really give back to the people who have supported me, whether that's the network or, the viewer base or listener base that I have. And, for all the hard work I put in as someone who does this all solo, it's worth it to see the reactions that I get on a daily basis. And, I get a bunch of nice comments all the time. And I respond to every single one that I see to really tell people, like, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to comment something nice and to say how much you appreciate what I do, because it means the world to me.
It's what you're doing is a little different than what I'm doing, since what you're doing is very much like it has to be timely. Like the news is breaking.
Yeah.
Everything is changing. Like the people that you're catering to are wondering what's happening that day, what's going to happen tomorrow. Like they're looking for little nuggets that they can think about, little nuggets they can talk about with their friends. I'm talking about value. So it's this episode will kind of be like a special episode for me, since the whole first half of the conversation is about stuff that's happening this week. So I'll have to bust my ass a little more than usual. And I'm only doing like 1 or 2 a month, I think, on average over the last few years, where you're doing them every day. So to me, like what you're doing sounds crazy, but I mean, obviously this is like your main focus. I've got all these other things I got to do too, but like that sounds crazy. It sounds stressful. Do you kind of like the routine of it, the constant, like the rush of it? Do you like that, or is that like do you think like, oh, in 10 years when I'm like the biggest Baltimore broadcaster, like do you still want to be like as deep into like getting online instantly, or do you kind of see yourself like slowing down a little bit and picking your spots a little bit more?
No, I mean, I definitely don't see myself slowing down. And, I do, it's become a routine for me. Like, you mentioned the whole routine aspect of it. Like, I'm very used to it now. And I know that it's like, again, like my schedule is unorthodox and it's not normal. And I understand that and I get it. But it's something that I've been able to kind of develop, and I'm still working on it. Right. But like, I think to me, a big aspect of what I do and just being in on that breaking news, because it's not just about, for me, all right, this happens and I need to go live and make it. Because again, like when breaking news happens, it's not as simple for me as just news happens. I'm able to just go to my setup, hit record and go. I am reacting to the news on social media the second it happens. Then I'm now, with my Instagram focus, I'm now putting that on both multiple social media platforms and trying to get that out everywhere. And then I have to make a thumbnail for the instant reaction stream. Then I have to title the instant reaction stream and still make sure the title is good and not just be like, oh, I'm going to no, I need to think about it and make sure I can make that the best thing to be, make the thumbnail the best thing to be. I got to tag it up. I got to do a short, got to upload that onto YouTube. Then I got to make a background. And then I got to actually like gather what I want to say and get all my information in front of me. And so all of that, by the time news happens, usually, I mean, I've gotten into a rhythm where it can take me anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to get that all situated and get that all going, depending on how much I do decide to react on social media right at the start. But there have been a lot of other things where, I just do a lot of stuff for Bleacher Report, and I would do a Bleacher Report stream. Then I'd hop on my stream, and that was after a game. Or I would, do more reactions on social media before I went live, and that would kind of tie me up a little bit. So I decided to focus more on, all right, I'm going to give my instant reaction takes, a couple of those, but then hop on. And it is like, it's a rush, you definitely feel it as it's going on. And I like to kind of, especially when I do instant reaction stuff, I definitely value the fact that it is an instant reaction. And I try to say that because a big thing for me, honestly, is in those moments, whether it's directly after a game or even during games. And I think, honestly, in the sports landscape, a lot of people are now starting to do more of that stuff during games, where then they'll clip their reaction to certain moments and you can see it, for like, not to rub salt in the wound, but on the Tyler Loop missed field goal, I saw a lot of people with, who were watching the game or filming their reactions to Loop's miss, and they would post that on social media with the clip of Loop missing. And I think that's a new thing that has become popular over the last year or two. And I'm still learning and developing in that way. But the instant reaction aspect, I think, is so real because it's so emotional in so many different ways, where I think, I hop on the next morning and do a show on that same topic in different ways. New information comes out or I have different perspective, but I make it clear, especially to the people who are watching or listening, like we're all feeling these emotions together. And that's what I value about this, is it's a place where we can all get our emotions out at the same time. I am the one that obviously is in front of the camera talking, but people in the chat, they're sharing their emotions, and I try to pull up as much as I can about what they're talking about and how the fan base is feeling. But I do like value making it a place where everybody feels like they can say something about how they're feeling and their emotions. And so in that reaction stream, like, it is a rush because I'm still recovering from whatever just happened, or I'm still processing whatever just happened. And then the next morning, I'm like, all right, now that we've had some time to process this, we can do a little bit more. Not that we don't deep dive on the reaction streams, but like, I'm like, all right, let's now that these thoughts are gathered, let's continue to talk about this conversation. So no, I mean, I love it. I love what I do. I love working, in this industry, and the network has been incredible to me. And I mean, in 10 years, I'm sure things will be even more different than they are now, and more mediums will have been established, and more ways to consume content and put out content will have been established. But I definitely know one of the things, and based off experience, like, I do pride myself on my work ethic, and not letting people down in that way, where I'm always going to go 100%, 110%, honestly. And I'm going to make sure that, regardless of everything, I'm going to put full attention on what I'm doing here, because, it's valuable. And there are a lot of also awesome, great content creators in the Baltimore community who cover the Ravens. And I try to amplify everybody's voice. Like, I want to have those people on, hear their perspective. I'm sure if I had done 1,683 episodes of just me talking to myself, I don't know how people would like that. So I like, again, I have my own episodes that I do, and, but I've also established a rhythm of, like, I have a couple of weekly guests who come on every single week. And, one's a former receiver in Kadri Ismail, and another one's a more so content creator and Sam Njoku. But then, I'll slot in, and, like, I've established through the other show that I work for, the Ryan Ripken Show, I've established a cool relationship with Nick Moore, the Ravens long snapper, and he'll come on and talk things with me, or, other former players, or, local people in the Baltimore media, getting national guys on. Like, I want to get as many perspectives as I can, because I think that, I wouldn't be doing my job properly if I didn't get as many different opinions as possible. And, the fact that it's a solo operation is still really cool for me.
That's cool, man. There's this type of energy. I think of it as like a spiritual energy. I don't know if you know exactly what I mean, but it's like, when you like meet a new friend and you stay up all night talking, or like you're working on a project and you only slept for 3 hours the night before, but you're locked in, and it's just like you're hitting on all cylinders, like Michael Jordan in the flu game, he feels horrible, but like he gets in there and he just like gets the energy. Like, it can't be coming from his body. He's pulling it from the atmosphere, but it sounds like you've kind of have some element of that working with you, where you're locked in on on what you're doing so much that you're able to work these crazy schedules without like you didn't come on being like, oh man, I'm so tired. I know you just did another episode right before this, and you're coming on fire, man. So do you feel that, like, and if you do feel that, like, why, when do you feel that the most, or when are you flowing the smoothest?
That's a good question, actually. I think, to me, I mean, I've always been a night person. And again, like, I definitely know my sleep schedule is not normal, and it definitely needs to improve. I'm not going to lie to you. It definitely needs to improve. But I think in the nighttime, because what I have essentially done is, when I record my episodes solo, I generally wait a decently long time, because, from experience, I mean, the Ravens have made moves at crazy times before, where, like, I'll record a whole episode with a guest, and then, at 11 p.m., the Ravens will make this huge move, and I'm just like, I have to do everything over. And so I understand there's a flow. And like now, like I mentioned, with everything in the media landscape changing, I make a short a day and put that out, and then I put that out on social media. But there's a routine for me at night where it does feel easy, where, I think during the day it's more information gathering. It's okay, what's happening in the NFL world, what's relating to the Ravens, who said this about Lamar Jackson or John Harbaugh or whatever. And then whether I'm recording with a guest, and that I do not do late at night. That's a lot more reasonable for guests in the timelines. But when I record with a guest, I make sure I have all my notes and get everything. And then I'm doing ads and my ad reads and sponsorships after the fact there. But I just think that I've really at nighttime, I think is when I flow the best. And I always do try to, make sure I'm not overworking myself because I have fallen into that trap before. Not with, this show, but with just other jobs I've held alongside the show, where sometimes, to me, I want to make sure everything's perfect. Like, I make sure everything is in order, ready to go. And, I'm checking it twice. I'm making a list and I'm checking it twice. And so to me, I have to make sure that I am resting. I am taking some time for myself, because I think it's important to also, because I don't think I could do my job effectively if I didn't do that. And again, it doesn't interfere with my work and what I get done, because I make sure that obviously that's priority one. Like I make sure my work gets done, and then, okay, let's take some time to kind of reset here and decompress. But to me, I think that with the routine I've established, and it evolves. I mean, it definitely does. We've added on more shows to the network, and I do different, radio hits each week or other appearances each week. And it's more so like no day looks the same for me, which I think is really cool, because there could be days where it is a slower news day. And that does happen where, I have to come up with a way to make a show that's intriguing when there's no Ravens news that's going on that day. And all right, what am I going to talk about that day? But then there are other days where it's like there's too much news and you can't capitalize. Because what I want to do is I want to capitalize on the news and make it so that we're talking about everything in as much detail as I can. But I also, like the network, we don't do hour-long shows. The max amount that we can do is 36 minutes. And, there is a lot you can say in 36 minutes, but there's also only so much you can say in 36 minutes. And so like, that's the max. Like usually, you're working with 26, 28, 30 minutes of stuff. And sometimes like I'll never forget, I remember the Lamar Jackson offseason when he was on the franchise tag and everyone thought he was going to get traded and the whole extension thing wasn't happening. And I had like every day for like 6 weeks, it was all about Lamar. It's actually kind of similar to this because every day it's like John Harbaugh coach search for the Ravens now. But for weeks, it was Lamar Jackson extension. Is he going to sign? And so I thought, on some random day in June when there's nothing to talk about, Lamar will sign an extension or something will happen. That, okay, cool. That's what I'm going to talk about for a while. That extension happened 4 hours before night one of the draft, which is the draft is the busiest time of year for me because it's so fast moving. And so I was thinking, I'm like, I'm going to have to like brush over the fact that Lamar Jackson just signed the most historic extension in this team's history because I got a draft to cover in 4 hours. And it's like, there's sometimes that like news just continues to flow and there's sometimes where nothing happens. But I think that there are enough similarities in what I have to get done, or even though my days look different, I've found a really nice routine and it's something that I still want to enhance. But for now, I kind of have it, and that's what I'm rocking with.
Yeah, man. Seems like you're doing your thing. It's even just over the last year, you're really clicking, man. That only happens when you're really, in flow. I think a large percentage of the time for extended periods of time. So that's cool, man. I've got a couple. I'm trying to think how to phrase this next question. I have this concept I call it like admin work, right? It's like it's different from the work that you have to get done, but you still have to do it at some point. So, like posting the shorts every day, like that's your active work. Whereas the admin work is more like tweaking the template or updating the logo or that type of stuff. Analyzing the analytics. What I have always struggled with when I've got a lot of deadlines is like staying up on that admin work, and I really honestly can't imagine like ever getting to it with doing your routine because everything like you've always have all this active work. I've kind of prioritized like these longer projects where if I don't have to get to it right now, I just do a chunk here, do a chunk there, and eventually it all adds up, But yeah, like, do you have a routine with like that admin work? I'm really just asking for myself. I'm just curious, like, yeah, how do you kind of keep up with the breaking news, the fast pace of everything, and also continue up in your game, continue building your systems out. Like, yeah, do you actively manage that in your routine, or is that just something you naturally kind of add to your flow?
Yeah, I think it's probably both. Where I definitely am always keeping up with that kind of stuff and always looking for ways to evolve. But I do think that there's so many intricate details with with what I do, where there is just like that general, yeah, I got to record a show today, or I got to upload a short today, and find that and find the right pictures and that. But then you're right, like all the different ways of trying to enhance and making things better. And because I think, again, you can have a general product that's really good and like a show that's really good. And I think that I do. Like, I think that, my show is good, but there are all these different ways that, people decide to click on stuff or not click on stuff. And part of that is like, all right, do people like longer or shorter videos? And obviously with attention spans, like when I record, I generally like want to do shorter stuff, but like with my guests, I'm never going to stop them. Like I want to hear everything they have to say. So episodes with guests generally go longer because I want to get as much opinion from them as I possibly can. And honestly, like with a lot of different stuff with thumbnails and, even like positioning and it's honestly like work within thumbnails too. Like this is just an example of kind of that. But, at first when I started, it was just like, you upload a general picture and that's it. Like nothing else. Like it's a picture of Lamar Jackson, full picture. But now what I've been doing is obviously like the thing that's in is a lot of like cutouts these days. So like multiple cutouts and different photos, and you put that all in the same thing. And then how do you highlight those guys in the cutouts? Do you use a white cutout, a black cutout? Do you do it like a straight line, or do you do it as like more of like a missed fan out? Like there are so many things within those, I guess, admin work stuff that I want to make sure I'm doing the best. And, I've tried a couple of different things with not just obviously thumbnails, but titling. And, even one of the things is like I put a lot of time and effort into upgrading my background over the course of the last couple of months. And so like new camera, new microphone, and, that's something where people did notice it, and it's not done. Like, there's still stuff that I can do to enhance it, which I plan to do this off season. But, just getting like a baseline for that and saying like, right, if my mic isn't as good as it can be, and, this is my job and I'm not investing into the best of my ability, then I'm not really doing my job properly. And, like I needed to work myself up to it and like get there, but I was, and I said, all right, I'm going to make sure that I can maximize this. And you're right. Like there's so much more that goes on just besides, okay, like we're sitting down and recording a show and publishing it. Like it goes so far beyond that. And there is a lot more work behind the scenes that goes into it. But I think, it's definitely rewarding. And look, like there are good days and bad days with shows in terms of numbers. And that's just always going to be what it is. And I can't tell you how many times I've been like, man, this is going to be like the best show ever. Like I have all of this all squared away and I did all the thumbnails great, titles great, content is great, and then it just completely flops. And then there was one where like, yeah, this is a good show. Like, it's kind of dead period of the off season. Not sure how many people are watching Ravens stuff right now. Still think everything is great, but the Ravens aren't the big topic right now. And then that show just like blows up, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is cool, but I wasn't expecting it. So there are always going to be like ebbs and flows with numbers and whether a show does well or not. But I just try again to put the show in the best position it can to succeed with everything. Like, I can sometimes agonize over titles and thumbnails and tags and the right things just to make sure that I'm making it as good as I can, because I know the show itself, the content within the show is good. And that's like the general stuff. But all that other stuff that you're talking about does go a long way with how the process flows.
Yeah, man. I always kind of wait till I have a break in the action, and then I try to get all that stuff done. Yeah. But that's really what I'm wondering. I'm like, man, you don't really get a break in the action. The last thing I really want to pick your brain about is it's like an impact kind of question. Like, I was kind of feeling your sense of like impact when you're talking about the communities, the post game, the watch party, all that. Like I could tell that it meant something to you, that you build these communities, people know each other, like that, seeing them chat with each other in the chat. Yeah, like the deeper you get into this media world, what like draws you? What impact are you trying to make? What, like, when you go in, who are you talking to, and like what are you hoping to like add to their day?
I think for me, being able to just make things as natural as possible and have conversations with people, and I think with a lot, especially with like TV and radio, I think like podcasting and putting out like content like the way that I do is kind of like an in between where it's like, it's still professional, you're still like covering all your bases with that. But there is a way to make it like a lot more free flowing than it is. And so like the relationships I've established with like, Kadri Ismail, like I said earlier, or some of these other guys that I've been able to, luckily talk to a lot and form those relationships with, it just becomes like a regular conversation. And that's with all the shows I've worked with and for, like that's been a goal where I want to come in, and I've grown in that aspect too. I definitely had to learn. Like earlier, it was like for me, it was a lot more like my shows were buttoned up and a lot more professional and like, all right, this is how we're going to do things. But as I started to get more comfortable and make a mark, at least I would say, that's something that I really valued, because I think that's what people want to hear is, they're just sitting back and listening to a regular conversation. And I think, look, the professionalness of it doesn't go away with that, but I still think that that's something that I really do want to continue to focus on. And then just being a resource, like, people will reach out to me asking for advice or, asking, hey, like, what would you do in this situation? And I mean, I'm more than willing to offer, because I like seeing other people succeed. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, like there are so many great local Baltimore Ravens content creators and just, people who also put in a lot of hard work. And, I'm one of the many. And I think it's really cool that, my show and what I do is a part of that community, and being able to give back in that way. And that people even like my stuff enough to come to me with those questions and have me on shows and do all this different stuff. Like it's something I don't take for granted at all. Like it's something that I genuinely appreciate, and know that I'm in a position of a place where I can help people. And people who are passionate sports fans like myself, passionate Ravens fans like myself, and want to do something similar to what I do. And I know that if I was in that position, I would want every single piece of advice I could get. So I want to do what I would want done with me, is like, hey, I'd love to hop on a call with someone who has more experience and kind of pick their brain, or talk with someone who I could pick their brain with. And so I want to be that person for other people who have those questions. And I have been, and I think it's been really cool. And, even if it's just someone asking one question to me and that's it, or if they want to, ask me a ton of questions, like either way, I always want to be that resource and available to people to help. And I think that that's another way that I can leave my mark, not in the show sense of like, this is my content, but of like, oh, like I learned this cool thing from Kevin and I'm applying that to what I do now. And I do this, but I did it a different way. But then, Kevin recommended this and it's worked, or something like that. I'm still learning. I'm still doing things myself, but I think my impact in what I've been able to do, it doesn't happen without people enjoying what I do, and, the listener base and the viewer base that I do have, whether it's on my show or through social media. And so I want to be someone that is able to give back in any way that I possibly can, and continue to put out the best content that I can, because I think to me, like there's always value in like the buttoned up stuff and TV, radio and whatnot. Like I don't think there ever will not be value for that. But I think in a world where I can make it kind of that happy medium between professional and just regular conversation, I think that to me is what I would want to consume content wise in terms of my show if I was listening to it. So I kind of try to put myself in other people's shoes, what they would want. And then obviously I'm still going to be myself and still be true to who I am and what I do, and just, my personality and whatnot. But being able to evolve and grow with that, I think is something I've been really trying to do.
I love it, man. Sweet. All right. It's Kevin.Oestreicher34. Is that right?
K Oestreicher34. Yeah.
K Oestreicher34 on Twitter, Instagram.
Yep.
But yeah, Kevin Oestreicher, thanks for coming on. Everyone who loved this episode can go check out our previous episode. Go find Kevin's links in the description everywhere this this conversation is published. Thank you all. Thank you, Kevin.
Appreciate you.